Thank you very much for being with us. I truly love what you're doing. I think this is high tech, this is innovation, and I think it's a topic that is very interesting for most of us in the group. So let me get back to the slides where I already shared your CV with the team, but for those who are new, uh, Kumar is the founder of NeuroLeap, India's leading applied neuroscience company, leveraging technology for better mental health and brain enhancement. So this is really the topic of today. Kumar has an MBA from Oxford. We had a caller from Oxford. He's a country champion ambassador for the Oxford Business Alumni in India. He's a member of the National Startup Council of CII and is member of the Apex Council of the Innovation Initiative by the Government of India. He has been featured by so many leading business media, CNN, Times, Bloomberg, and he's written for HBR. So what an honor, Kumar, and thank you. So a couple of things from his website: unlock the limitless potential of your brain. This is what we want to learn today. How can we unlock it? And well, more. You will be able to see that, but I want to go now to Kumar. And Kumar, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us and to share a bit of what you do, what you've been learning um, throughout these years about the brain. So welcome, Kumar.
Um, Thank you, Antonio, for inviting me and for a very generous introduction. That is the good part about being amongst friends, that they will always do you big favors by heaping praises on you and taking whatever you write on LinkedIn at face value without bothering to verify it. So thank you so much.
Tell us a bit more, Kumar. What did you study? Tell us about your first steps in business. What did you want to be when you were a teenager?
Sure. Well, what did I want to be when I was a teenager? That's a difficult one. To be honest, I had no clue I was going to be, running a neuroscience business for sure. Um, I've been a vagabond, and is the easiest way to put it. I've been a vagabond. I've been a credit research analyst. Did work for Deutsche Bank. Managed about 900 global financial institutions across the world, sitting in Bengaluru. I've supported the top investment bankers at Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, helped Standard & Poor's outsource their entire credit research to India, done a variety of things. And, somewhere in my long sort of this period, I think when I was at Oxford about 19 years ago, I realized some of the fun things that the university was doing on neurosciences. And obviously, that time they were not doing the things we are doing today, but that kind of got me interested in the business of neuroscience and brain-computer interfaces. I came back to India and I didn't give it much thought that time. It was too premature to do anything of that sort in India, and I was doing some of the things which I mentioned. About 9 years ago, exactly 9 years ago, a little over 9 years ago, I was on holiday, and this was Christmas vacations, and I was on an island on the Southeast Asia, and that island has just one resort. It's one luxury resort and nothing else. You cannot take your family to a mall or go shopping or catch a movie. You just got to be on the beach and have a gala time, my kind of vacation. And on the second or third day, I was like really relaxed. And I said, you know what, there's got to be a better way to find this kind of peace and calm and happiness than having to fly, 6 or 7 hours and, take some really expensive island villa. There's got to be an easier way, right? And how can I do this all year round? And I kind of remembered all my friends and colleagues from Oxford and some of the professors who about so many years ago were doing all of this stuff on neuroscience and brain-computer interfaces. And literally, it was Christmas morning in Southeast Asia and Christmas Eve in the US or UK. And I was calling up these guys and disturbing them on their Christmas Eve dinner when they were with family. And I was like, guys, what happened to all this stuff that we were doing? Where is it? What's going on? Are you still doing something on it? And can we do dinner and we'll call this? And but the next 5 days at that island, maniac, doing research. I came back to India, flew to the US, and for the last 9 years, that's all I've been doing. Just crazy research in neurosciences. I've been looked by NASA. Somebody's backed by, the U.S. Department of Defense. Somebody's backed by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. All kinds of stuff. And having industry insiders who are close friends really helped. And of course, you have to be raving mad, to put in 8-9 years without knowing what's going to happen and just study, get certified, do all the crazy research. And about 6 years of doing that, and in late 2016, about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, I started NeuroLeap. We're the only company in India in the applied neuroscience space where we are using non-invasive technology brain and help you enhance it only using technology without using any medication, without having you to do all the hard work of meditating or doing sort of all the good things that we teach as a coach, let's say. Sorry, that's a big bit of a long monologue, but I'll let you sort of ask me more questions.
Well, I love where you came with the idea. There's no better place than on a remote beach island and just think, well, I want this for the rest of the year for all my life. I I think it's great, Kumar. Kumar, can you explain neuroscience for somebody who's not technical at all? Just what your business does for really not technical, just very simple.
Sure. So, I think everyone on this group and is associated with one common thread, which is enhancing human performance, whether we do it through coaching or training or leadership development programs or project management, but it is ultimately about human performance. Either it is about bettering the human capacity and capability or the output, and hopefully both, right? Now, the problem is we've always been going at it at the level of the mind, right? So we will write a book or we will talk about saying, you should not have fear. You should not have anxiety, to be fearful of things, right? Or for the people at the other end of the spectrum, we will say, well, you should be not very aggressive. You should be polite. You should take the team along, things like that. But it is another primal instinct to be a chest thumping primate. This has never happened before. I don't know why I'm dropping off.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
No worries, Kumar. We're amongst friends here.
Yeah. So sorry. So I said the question is that our mind keeps changing. It keeps changing our likes, our dislikes, our impressions about people, about things. And those changes are not necessarily brought about by our own thinking. It's not something that always we consciously do. Antonio is wearing a lovely, is it pink, Antonio, a pink shirt?
Yes.
And I'm not sure whether Antonio took a decision that, 20 years ago, if he was always wearing whites and blues, and he made a conscious decision and went to a coach and said, help me move from blues and whites to pink, right? He didn't do that. So what happened? Antonio's brain kept on getting bombarded by television, by movies, by magazines, by billboards. So he went to the movies and he saw a smart looking actor who kind of looked like Antonio. And Antonio said, "Oh, wow, this guy looks great in a pink shirt." And he walks out of the cinema. And in the store, in the cinema, there is a mannequin with a similar pink shirt. That's reinforcement. He goes home, he sees a magazine, there's another smart looking model with a similar pink shirt. This way, his mind has been impacted slowly, the superficial mind. Slowly, that impact has got transferred to the brain, right? But not all impacts which go through the mind reach the brain sufficiently because the brain is hardwired, right? So many a times you need to go directly to the brain. So think of it. I'll give you a very rough analogy. How many people use the iPhone, right? And Apple has this trick they do that whenever there's a new iPhone, they slow down the previous models, right? They make it, the memory is slower, etc. And you are wanting a high-speed phone, which is not the latest. So you're saying, hey, you know what? I want the latest iPhone now because although I like the existing iOS, I want the latest iPhone because my existing iOS doesn't work anymore. And I need to have iOS 11 or 12 or 13, but iOS 13 is not going to work on iPhone 5. Am I right?
Yeah.
So your mind is like software. It's a very bad analogy, but your mind is like software. It keeps changing. It needs to be upgraded, but upgraded software needs high-end hardware. And what is the hardware that your mind is relying on? The primary hardware that your mind is relying on is the brain. Then, of course, you have your central nervous system, your gut-brain connection, all of it. So your brain also cannot function just in isolation. It needs to have your heart and cardiovascular and, your gut and everything proper. But therein lies the challenge that neuroscience, in terms of the applied neuroscience business that I run, is trying to solve is how can we improve the health of your brain so that your mind can take care of itself. So that when Antonio tells you that, hey, you know what? The next time you lose your temper, just count to 10, right? And you're actually able to count to 10 and you don't just completely lose your temper and forget about what he said, right? So let me give you another example. If somebody is having a conflict issues, let's say two colleagues, they've got a workplace conflict, you can get a counselor or a psychologist or a mediator to talk to them to try and resolve the conflict. And it works most of the time. But if one of these people has an attention deficit disorder, we know about ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. That means he's got a problem in either the neurobiology or the neurochemistry of his brain. Then no amount of counseling or CBT or talk therapy will solve the issue which is inherent in the brain. For example, if someone has high cholesterol and has clogged arteries, you cannot simply say, oh, you know what, your arteries are clogged. But if you just be positive and go and read the book, The Secret, and visualize that my arteries are getting declogged, forget about the 90% blockage, and keep eating red meat and don't exercise, don't take your pills, and just by your visualization and the power of the mind, your arteries will get unclogged. Oh, that's ridiculous. Yes, you need to be positive. Yes, you need to do visualization. You need to do all of those good things, but you also need to go out and impact your physiology. So you will need to run, work out, do your breathing exercises, make sure you're not consuming too much fat, so on and so forth, to ensure ensure that your arteries are declogged, right? Similarly, every point in your health and well-being today is managed by data which your body gives out directly without asking you. I'm sure everyone on this call has used a thermometer. It is the oldest analytical tool for your health and the cheapest one. You cannot manage your health by and large in a lifespan if you don't have this cheap thermometer with you, right? So, for example, somebody in the family is fallen sick, a child maybe, and you call up the doctor and say, oh, my child has high fever. And the doctor needs to make a decision based on how high the fever is. Either he needs to say, oh my God, this is 104 degrees and something needs to be done, or it's maybe just 99 degrees and there's nothing to worry. But if you don't have a thermometer and you're not able to give him that data, he can't act without it. Think about, 6 other absolutely day-to-day technologies which are meant to assess your health or the state of your biology. A blood pressure monitor, a glucose meter, an electrocardiogram, an EEG, even the weighing scale. You are on a diet, you want to remain fit. How do you judge yourself if you're not able to measure your body, right? Measure your weight, your body mass index, so on and so forth. Can you imagine managing your health and well-being without the path lab, without getting a blood test done today? It's very difficult, right? So similarly, when we fall sick, let's say somebody stubs their toe and it is swollen, and for 5 or 6 days you try all the home remedies, you put some ice packs on it, you take a painkiller, all of that stuff, and it doesn't go down, you go out and get an x-ray, right? If the x-ray is inconclusive, you go out and get an MRI or a CT scan. Similarly, if you've got stomach pain, you go out and get a sonography or an ultrasound. For every part of your biology, you have a way to scientifically assess what is going on. Then why for so long have we relied on our own understanding of our mental state to judge how we are feeling and communicate it to somebody? You don't go and tell a doctor, hey, you know what? I think I feel feverish. I think I have pain. Let me get a 100-point questionnaire and I will answer it. And basis the response to the questionnaire, you can tell me whether I have malaria or not. That's ridiculous. He needs to check your blood and tell you whether you've got malaria or not. So similarly, now you have a technological understanding of the functioning of your brain. And we are not talking about the anatomy. We don't want to know whether a part in the brain is enlarged or not. That you can do with a neurologist, going under an MRI or a CT scan. But a CT scan doesn't tell you how the brain is functioning. And now we have the ability to track your brain waves. So that's our core product, which is the brain assessment, where we read your brain waves simply by placing sensors on your scalp. We take in about 500,000 data points, and looking at that data and doing a statistical analysis, we are able to look at different networks in the brain which are responsible for things like, for example, memory. So there's a network associated with memory, network for mood and depression, or addiction and obsession, or executive functions, decision making, things like that. And you're able to provide the person a really good understanding, a data-driven understanding of what is going on, why are they behaving the way they are behaving, what is causing their reactions the way they are reacting, right? Chronic pain maybe, or lack of attention, things like that. And having that understanding, which hasn't come from you. So when you come into one of our centers, we don't ask you questions in terms of an MBTI or a DISC and trying to understand what your own understanding of your mental state is. We go directly to the biology, or rather to the neurobiology, to understand what's going on. And then from there on, we sort of ratify. Once we have that report, we actually share it with you, help you understand what you're going through. Once you corroborate that, so let's say we say, okay, we see your attention network is dysregulated. Are you finding it difficult to pay attention? Do you zone out easily? Do you get distracted easily? And if the answer is in the affirmative, then we know that the mind is in the same place as what the brain is in, and we can start the therapy. And the therapy again is using technology where we allow the brain to rewire its own neural pathways, basically allow the subconscious part of the brain to train itself without any external impetus or medication. I'm sorry, I just went off on a long monologue.
No, but it's great because you're connecting the dots. You're explaining. I like with analogies what you're doing and what you brought to the research around the brain and with data and technology. So I think Kumar, it was a very good exposition of what you do. I have two maybe related questions, Kumar, and then I will open for questions from our friends. First, how do you think the current crisis affects human brains? Will it have an impact? It is happening an impact. And the second question, Kumar, is from all the research that you've done, can you share with us 1, 2, 3 tips without going through the whole process of analysis, but you say, well, if you do that, you can improve your brain, you can enhance your brain. These are best practice. So
I'm seeing some questions on my screen. I'll just go one by one. The first one is from Antonio, who's asking, how will the current global crisis affect people's brains? Well, human beings are social animals, and the lack of physical social interaction will certainly have a negative impact on the brains. There are several neurotransmitters which get triggered with physical interaction. And I think that will have a somewhat of a negative impact since we're not able to get enough of it during the lockdown. The fact that people will also be living in some sort of fear, anxiety, or uncertainty about their careers, their jobs, or loss of livelihoods will also alter the genetic expression of the nervous system and the neural circuits in the brain. And that could also have a negative impact. Also, depending on where people are, and if they are unable to get fresh air and exercise and sunlight, that too will not help. The next question again is from Antonio, and he asks, what are 2 or 3 techniques, simple to apply tips for us to enhance our brain power? Well, the first thing is to be able to go to sleep on time. Whilst there's a lot of research and people know that 7 to 8 hours of sleep is required for the human brain and body to function well, in the lockdown era, I find a lot of people staying up late because technically they don't have to go to work the next day, or students don't have to go to school or college or university the next day. People are really altering their times of when they go to bed and when they wake up. They're staying up and watching TV late, or catching movies or shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime or what have you. My suggestion is to go to bed on time and get up early so that you can stay as close to the natural circadian rhythm as possible. It is now proven that staying close to the rhythm will positively impact your mental health. The second is, although you might not be able to get out of your house in an open environment, but still try and be physically active, and not just in terms of number of steps you walk in a day, but doing some real physical, high energy exercise and activity at home for 15 to 30 minutes every day. The third one is to try and do some positive mindfulness, some exercises, deep breathing, which will help you bring your central nervous system, your mind, your brain, your cardiovascular system in rhythm. So those are 3 tips that I would say. The next question I see is from Ron Carucci, and he says, Kumar, can you speak about the effect of trauma? What happens with amygdala hijack when we respond to situations of stress that trigger past challenges? And have you found ways folks can better self-regulate? Well, Ron, clearly, self-regulation does help to a very large extent in managing any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. The challenge is that it is a lot of hard work. And whilst for people who are not going through any PTSD, it is easy for us to talk about the fact that one should self-regulate. But for the person undergoing PTSD, it is far easier said than done. One of the ways to try and self-regulate again is meditation and deep and slow breathing. The second is to try and put yourself through high intensity and deep exercise, which increases your heart rate for a very short span of time. And then practice deep breathing and get it back to a resting state, which is lower than normal. This sort of exercise and this sort of behavior helps the body better combat and the brain to help it come back to a normal state of breathing, come back to a normal mental state. We have found that this works for several people, but for the ones that it doesn't, then we have to use our brain-computer interface technology to help the brain rewire its own subconscious so that this so-called amygdala hijack that you refer to, which is always in fight or flight mode because of the PTSD, or easily gets into fight or flight mode, can be toned down and can get into a better zone, which is not so chaotic as in a case of PTSD. So yes, self-regulation can work. And if not, then we use the brain-computer interface. The next question I see is from Rosina Spinoy. And she says, I would like to know if Kumar also does research on neurodiversity. Well, yes, we do a little bit of research on neurodiversity, but not something which is path-breaking or something that I can really share, which will add value. The next question is James Bryant. What is the cutting edge of neuroscience? Well, James, there are several things which are at the cutting edge in terms of neuroscientific advisory, neuroscientific research, and inventions. Some of it, what I'm seeing is, at one hand, we have people like startups like Kernel or Elon Musk's Neuralink, which are trying to provide hardware and software which will allow people to manipulate their own neural activity just using technology. At the other end, there are companies which are looking at ways and means to actually control robots, robotic arms, prosthetics, just by using your neural pathways. So there are several things going on, and only time will tell when many of these will see the light of day, where regular consumers like you and me will be able to access them and use them safely. The key thing is to be able to use it safely. The next question is from Mark Prensky, and he says, this is about switches. The body probably has them to turn many things on and off like stress. We are just learning what they are and how to control them. Someday we will know, for example, how to turn off sleep and how to self-regulate many other things. How long from now will it be in our kids' lifetimes? Well, Mark, I certainly think that it will be in our lifetimes. And we will have the ability to manipulate or modulate our own neural pathways very soon. Like I said, it will be a matter of choice for the early adopters, because a lot of those technologies will be invasive, either in the physical sense, which will require electrodes or chips implanted onto the surface of your brain, or it could be non-invasive, but it could still require, some sort of waves or currents to be entering your brain. That is still available right now. But like I said, it is a matter of choice on whether one wants to undergo those sort of issues which might be presented with the use of some of these technologies. But I'm certain that they will be available in our lifetimes. I hope I've answered your questions. And thank you so much for bearing with all the internet issues I faced yesterday. Thank you.
Everybody has experience. Susan, you were talking. Is something you want to share?
I have a lot to share. My experience is 10, 12, close to 15 years old or older. I'd be interested in knowing what the latest research says about whether neurofeedback really lasts. I have 3 children that did it when they were very young, and we were laughing. One of them was here last night, and we were laughing about the fact that it didn't help because she's still taking ADHD meds, which we resisted for many, many years. But as an adult, she finally succumbed. So I just don't know. I know that the company that I worked for used a helmet type of gear, and I would be curious to know whether Kumar is licensing technology for other psychologists to use, or whether they are primarily a research or speaking organization to promote neurofeedback specifically, and if neurofeedback, are they promoting the kind of technology where a licensed psychologist actually works with children to do the neurofeedback, or are they promoting what we've seen in the States as more home games where parents can buy games for their children and they wear a helmet or some kind of a gizmo on their head and they watch the spaceship and make it move.
Yes.
I don't know what you can share. There he is.
You're back. Good to see you.
I'm so sorry, guys.
Maybe.
Antonio, I can't apologize enough. I'm messing up your call and your recording and giving everyone a shoddy experience. I'm so sorry.
Kumar, no need to apologize. We are here all friends.
Just a comment. I mean, by the way, if you want something to smile about technology, then look at the internet about the holographic video conference from the series Silicon Valley. You can find it on YouTube. And there you can see how technology fails you step by step, including going through all the steps from a holographic connection to a video connection to a phone connection, and you get cut off every time. And they've done it in a very funny way. And since we are in a very sad period, sometimes you need something to smile. So look it up at YouTube. I think it's under holographic video conference in the context of the HBO series Silicon Valley.
Okay.
That's a bit outside the theme, but that's for the technology part. Now, in terms of neuroscience, I have just one comment, one observation. I think there were times where it was coming up big time. That was my impression. I'm not an expert. I've never been deeply involved. I've been involved in learning, so of course I heard about it. And my impression over the last decade was that it wasn't too visible. I know a few people who have been dealing with it. It was similar like with emotional intelligence, for example. Came up big time and then sort of disappeared to the background. And I think that's one of the questions that comes to my mind. Why is this so? And was it because in practical terms, we couldn't get enough, results, or where there are other reasons? And this is what I would be interested, of course, in Kumar's perspective, because he's dealing with it all the time. But this is something I have personally observed.
Thank you, Richard. I want to go to Ron. You made a good question. If you can share it, and we'll get it to Kumar as soon as he's back.
Yeah, so I think as people who are all trying to change behavior or help others do better, I've been fascinated by my clients when they are triggered, when they go into amygdala hijack, when there's a PTSD moment or a past trauma that they're recreating in the moment, and they're suddenly, you know, it's the classic case. We all have moments where we say to ourselves, why do I do that? And it turns out that those behaviors are not random, right? They're actually almost always rooted in past experiences that our brains have not resolved. So I was wondering what, and so teaching our clients to self-regulate, to know when those triggers are happening, to know when we're going to freeze or have an angry outburst or get nervous, or what are the conditions under which our brains separate our executive function from our amygdala and suddenly take over in ways we don't want. And then later we think, why am I always doing that? And to help people see that they're not random, that those behaviors have reasons behind them and we can find them out. I was wondering if he had found any, through his brain scans, or any patterns he had seen with folks with trauma or, of any kind, when those imprints are there. How have they found ways to better self-regulate in those moments, or better anticipate those moments and prepare for them in advance?
My contribution to this would be that there are various ways of self-regulation out there, and you might be familiar with some of them. But after leaving London Business School, where I met Antonio, and working in the field of finance for a number of years, I retrained as a therapist. And precisely my field of work is based on teaching people to self-regulate. So I use a combination of coaching and understanding of the mind and acupuncture-based tapping techniques, which are in fact proven to reduce blood flow to the amygdala, to reduce cortisol. You know, the science, that's what the science tells us. And in effect, it stops the hijack in its tracks. And you know, you made a very good point, Ron, about nearly knowing when that might go wrong and preparing to the point where by the time it happens, the hijack doesn't come along. So you stay calm, you stay collected, and obviously all that blood flow that doesn't have to go to the amygdala to keep you in fight or flight can now go anywhere else it needs to go, such as your frontal lobe for clear thinking, you know?
Perfect.
So
That's a great explanation.
Yeah.
Do people need to go to an acupuncturist for it, or are there like acupressure things we can do for ourselves?
They come to me and I teach them how to do it, where to tap. It's all acupuncture based. They're very well known endpoints of acupuncture channels where people tap on, and I teach them how to do it. And in fact, one of the things that it's been very, very effective with is severe trauma for PTSD. In under 6 sessions, people can no longer be diagnosed to have PTSD. So we've done a lot of work with veterans, you know.
Yeah.
And these days we're doing a lot of work with NHS frontline workers, you know. I personally, because of my background in finance and in business, I work a lot with professionals, but also as a mother, I made it my mission to introduce this in schools. So I work with either adults or children as long as they're at school, you know?
If only our children could learn to self-regulate early on when their brains are developing. So powerful. Have you used EMDR? We're using EMDR
yes, it's part
here.
of my training, actually.
We're using EMDR here with frontline workers.
Yes, it's so effective. I had a client inquiry today and we were talking about this. It's quite fabulous, EMDR. And at the advanced level, my techniques include EMDR in the middle field.
That's great.
So,
for those of you who don't understand,
sorry, go on.
EMDR is another PTSD. It's a wonderful technique where, you know, when you're dreaming, your eyes move back and forth, and it and creates neural pathways and it forces them. And so EMDR helps you recreate or unwire the neural pathways of trauma by it's not quite hypnosis, but it's making your eyes follow them as you're recreating the trauma to help break those pathways. It's really, it was discovered by a woman in the Army, quite by accident, doing PTSD training. Really wonderful, wonderful work.
It's pretty awesome, isn't it? It's pretty awesome.
It's kind of scary.
And I work a lot with, you've probably heard of a psychiatric clinic called The Priory in London. And the consultant psychiatrist there, Shruti, often sends me people, and she's practically in love with the combination of the tapping techniques I talk about with the EMDR, you know? She just can't get to everything. So she's actually trained on all this. This is what's interesting, you know, but she just can't get to everything. So she sends them to me and I show them the EMDR and the tapping. So well done to you for bringing up the matter of self-regulation, because in the end, everything I feel, everything we ever feel starts with a thought.
Yeah.
But no thought and no feeling happen without involving your brain. So if you can talk to your brain and calm it down, that's when you're on to a winner.
To Richard's point about how do we make neuroscience more accessible, I have found that the brain out isn't helpful, but when you start with behavior in or thoughts in and self-regulation in, it changes neuroscience to something more accessible, something that we all need to understand how our brains work and how they're wired and how our particular brain became wired, maybe in ways we didn't want. And that because of neuroplasticity, because our brains can rewire themselves, we can help that happen. I think all of us are working with leaders and clients and organizations who are standing up in front of the world, anxious, stressed, fearful, and not self-regulating very well all the time.
I know.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Yolanda. Let me just quickly check if Kumar is there. If not, Kumar, I don't see him. I think he's going to feel really bad. I'm going to write him afterwards.
Poor guy.
Poor. Let me go to Maria. She has her hand raised for 10 minutes already. And then, yeah, James, you're coming next. Maria.
I am connecting with what Ron and Yolanda said. I was asking myself, what about meditation practice and breathing practice? I did a study about the amygdala in 2015, and we found out that the practices of meditation would help a lot on avoiding or controlling that situation. So this could also be a combination of the techniques you have been talking about.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, good addition.
Absolutely.
James, you want to comment?
I was only going to say, yes, I started my little contribution by saying, you know, that they're not the only ways. There are other ways that are also helpful. Absolutely. Some people are up for one, some people are up for the other, you know. Some people come to me and say, I can't meditate, but some people that come to me meditate and also do this, you know.
Antonio, if we can get him back at some stage, I don't mean necessarily today, but some other time, I would be really interested to know the line and what we know about the difference between hardwired and software in the brain, because a lot of the chat that's going on at the moment, we don't know whether it affects the actual physical makeup of the brain in terms of the neurology, as in rearranging the neurons and the way the brain is put together, or whether it's just affecting the way the brain runs the software. And whenever you do any form of intervention or you look at populations, there's always a normal curve, obviously, and you get some people that you can't change, or it's so hardwired. If you take something really controversial like pedophilia, for example, you get some people at one end where it's a wiring issue and you cannot change them. You get other people where the context that they're brought up in produces that kind of behavior, and you may be able to redo the software. But we're all kind of guessing. We're like little children at the moment playing with medicine back in the Middle Ages when they thought that letting blood out was going to cure everything. We know so little, and it would be really, really interesting if since he's working at the cutting edge, to kind of know where we are with that software, hardware understanding. That'd be fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Well, I think we're going to leave it here. Kumar is not coming back. Mark wanted to say something. Mark? Yeah.
Let me just say that's really interesting. But when we talk about hardware and software, we are really talking metaphorically, and we chose to use that metaphor. We really don't know exactly what's going on in there, and worse, we don't know what's going on in there in a way that we can control. Maybe someday we will, but we should be able to turn our sleep off and on, and we can't. We should be able to turn our PTSD off and on, but we often can't. So we're just at the beginning of mixing things that people have found out over thousands of years, like meditation and maybe acupuncture from China, who knows how far back that goes, and new things. But really, I don't think neuroscience is actually helping us a lot, other than finding cognates, other than finding things that change. So we use the term amygdala, or we use the term whatever terms we use, because we now know those things exist. But I think we have to be very, very careful, and I'm sorry we're not hearing Kumar, about making any conclusions based on the neuroscience. It's so early.
That's true. What I'm going to propose to Kumar is to come back. We'll get him another time. Maybe I will copy the questions from the chat, so maybe he can already record that for us to get his input, and then we'll try to schedule him again for a bit more interaction. But sorry for today. I think this happens in the virtual world, and I'm sure Kumar is not feeling great, but we'll make sure he does, and I'll send him your regards. And so thank you for being here today. Next week we'll have Ben, which is a great guy. He's a professor in Henley Business School, Leadership Management School, and speaker in the BBC, Sky News, every time there's leadership comments. So I think that's where an area where there needs to be a reinvention completely, especially some kind of leaders that we see today. So that's going to be very interesting. Sunday, we have the person who just spoke, Mark, with his great, crazy, bold idea of reaching 2 billion kids. I've shared with you a couple of preparation insights on where he wants to go. I asked him a couple of questions to be more specific. And as soon as you send that, Mark, I'll share with the team. So I look forward to see you on Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Europe.
I need everybody's help, so please join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Richard.
Bye-bye.
It was a good session, though.
Yeah, it's always good to see each other.
Okay.